Hello and welcome to a video where we get to talk more about Lorcana, and we had a great weekend of Lorcana wide. At least there was loads to watch on Twitch. There was loads of the big American winner cases and stuff. There was CCQs as well, which we're going to dive into, and I think it's going to be a good point to talk about with, I think, what the decks are to bring to the next CCQ, or what decks are the viable decks right now. And I think it's fairly interesting. I think the meta is actually quite wide. I think there are like definite choices, but I think there is a very wide meta as well. But yeah, we had a good fun. We brought Purple Steel to a winner box, and just seems like one of the stronger choices right now. I think it's absolutely fine to bring that, and on the right conditions, the right day, it can definitely get you the win. But right now, I don't know if anyone's planning for their next event. I don't know if the CCQ is coming up this weekend, but we've got Wakefield in the UK next weekend, so I'm definitely planning for that. And just going through my thought process of what really is the right choice. So on the screen right now, of course, the first thing we're going to look at here, this is the winning list from Barcelona, which definitely will impact what people are going to be playing going to the next CCQs and the next events, and what could even be seen at your local league, the next league night. But so this is the Chromodogs list, also adapting and putting some of the under the season there. I think the list is really cool because with all the big bodies now and a lot of the Sapphire decks just ramping to big explosive stuff, there's not much use for the under the sea. Not much use for the under the sea in this deck at least, but keeping it in there because you can still just absolutely dominate any of those aggro matchups. And sometimes, when you play against Purple Steel, when you manage to under the sea Genie or Hook and something else, that's enough tempo for you to just turn everything sideways. So it still has tons of use. I think it's still pretty good. Even into Blurple, again, you take a Rafiki and you take the Genie out and you minus them 2 characters. They only play 1 character a turn, so all around seems pretty cool. I'm pretty sure people are going to see Barcelona and go, right, well, this looks like the deck to bring. I'm going to be playing Dogs at the next event. I think the easiest assumption is that, like, okay, this Dogs deck is real, I'm going to play it. But I think if you watch the finals, one of the issues was it was Purple Steel, which arguably has always had a fairly good matchup into Dogs. I think it is favoured, but, it's still lost in that event. And I think it's even without, like, dog techs and stuff, like, I think it is still a favoured matchup for the Purple Steel, but sometimes they can just get ahead of you. They still are on the play of an aggressive deck. It's not, I don't think it's as clean cut as it's massively favoured for Purple Steel. I think it's just, yeah, on paper it looks like it should be winning that matchup, but it doesn't always come out that way, especially in my testing as well. And it's like, the Dogs player knows this is its worst matchup. They're going to have that practice down to a T. Whereas other matchups, they might just, just go, well, we'll just win off the Chromicon. But I think the other option as well is Purple Steel. Purple Steel is just like littering everywhere. And right now, for me, I put a tweet out after playing it this weekend. It feels like that Ruby Amethyst deck, like the way Ruby Amethyst was for so many sets. It's the all-rounder. It's the every matchup you kind of groan a little bit like, oh, I don't like this matchup, but there is no matchup you do like. Maybe Amber Steel or something like that, but it feels like it has application into everything. It feels like it's because it also because it's using steel and how powerful steel is in this set compared to how powerful Ruby used to be. You can just put things in here. Certainly Ruby Amethyst always lacked was they couldn't break items, but with Amethyst Steel you can put in some item breaker. So if we watch those finals again and say the gentleman was able to put Benja in his list, like 2 copies of Benja in there, and take out something that he didn't want, take out those Tinkerbells and put 2 Benjas in there, the matchup goes completely the other way. I think the gimmick is that they get to just hit something, bounce something, and then it's very hard for them to remove the board by the time the Dogs player gets to 20 lore, because they're having to replay all their characters, and some of them are expensive, and that's sort of how the matchup's supposed to go. But say if you had 2 copies of Benja in there, I think that goes completely the other way. So like I say, you've got those 2 new steps now. You've got Dogs players will, there'll be a lot of people going, oh, I'll bring Dogs because that looks like it just won, and like, how can you beat that? It looks great. And then more people will go, well, Amethyst Steel, generally he still have a really good matchup, and what if I just put 2 Benjas in there, or what if I just practice the matchup and see how I beat playing against Chromicon? How hard can it be? You can just go to those steps. So I still think like Amethyst Steel is up there as one of the strong contenders for the event. But I think we can go even further than that. This is my Amethyst Steel, but we'll cover that in the end. This is sort of how I would update and look at what is the best choices and the best things to bring to your next CCQ or your next winner box or your next event that is important to you, no matter what that is, really. This is sort of how I would look at it now, updating it after seeing it. Again, it's that thing of, I think after what's the event after Bologna as well, I still like understated the importance of how good Dogs is. The 7-cost tramp is like borderline an insane card that's like hidden away in what's it called, in a dual link. I think if it wasn't in there, Amber would just definitely use that card, and Green would, like, the two colors it's dual linked to would just always 4x that card because it's so impactful and so strong. But yeah, I find that just kind of, I always understate how good Dogs can actually be. And we saw a lot of Circle of Life decks on the stream. None of them really actually converted to the top cut and did well in the end. But, watch them, they can just do some amazingly powerful things, just a 1-drop and the 7-cost. And you're going to have more 1-drops and characters in the board once you've played that 7-drop, because you usually play a lot of stuff to minus its cost, then play it. You set up a Circle of Life singer, as long as you Bobby discarded a Stitch Careless Surfer or something, you can just get these huge bombs or a Clarabelle just onto the board. It's just nuts. And then from there, you can set up things for your Prince Philip combo and just do it was amazing to watch a lot of these Circle Life decks. But the Chromacon, the Chromadogs aggro Under the Sea builds still just proving to be very, very consistent. I guess because pretty much every game plan is the same. They're going to want to build up these boards, play the 7-cost tramp, aggro you out, or play the Chromacon down and turn everything sideways. And the game plan seems to work into pretty much every matchup. Your mulligan is very tight, and I wouldn't say simple. It's definitely a complicated mulligan, but you know what you want to do into every game. It doesn't matter if you're on the play, draw, or whatever. I feel like you can always bring a similar game plan to it. Of course, there is more depth to it. It's not just like a deck where it has one thing it does and it just wins every game. It different matchups and stuff like that. But overall, it's just actually fairly consistent at what it does. That 7-cost tramp allowing them to find all the cards they want and then manipulate from the bin as well. Putting Lilos in there is just back-breaking, and maybe just playing double 7-cost tramp as well, one after another, is again just so powerful. So that sits up there. Amethyst still, like I say, if anyone remembers, I don't know actually how old Lorcana is, but if you remember playing Lorcana from set 2 to about set 5, I think set 4, set 5 was where it sort of started to change and the deck became something else. But like bounce package Ruby Amethyst is what I'm talking about, is how Amethyst Steel has felt for me. Just this complete all-rounder. You can put you can push it quite far as well. It has a lot of depth to it, has a lot of skill to it, making sure what to ink, what not to ink, when to attack, when to hold, when to quest, when to be aggressor, when to not be, how to draw properly, when do I use Dumbo, when do I use my docks, when do I play Demona if I'm going to play a Demona build, all of these things like just feel very important in that deck. But it can still just lose to high rolls. It doesn't high roll anything, like you don't have a 7-cost tramp in there, you don't have draw a bunch of cards, play Under the Sea, you don't have ramp onto Cinderella into Goliath into Tinkerbell, you don't have those things. But from what I'm testing, like I say, you play enough games, you find out that it is still just going to curve out every game. It rarely ever bricks. It rarely ever doesn't have something to play on the turn, even if it's not the most optimal thing. Just a consistent powerhouse. We're seeing it just turn up in top cuts and just dominate them all because it's just the consistent deck. And again, that was the reason why I always felt Ruby Amethyst did so well. It was never objectively a bad deck. It never did anything amazing. Back then it didn't Diablo Shift. It didn't Whole New World. It didn't do all of those fun things in Dime Tap for 12 lore. But every game you knew consistently it was going to curve out into its removal, into doing its game plan every game. And that's how Amethyst Steel has felt. And to be honest with you, Amethyst Steel has always been that as well. It's just been in the shadow of Ruby Amethyst, I think, because Ruby, pre-rotation was such a powerful color, and post-rotation now we've just got this color combination, and Ruby's sort of really fallen down a bit. But yeah, I feel like that is the strongest, safest choice is Amethyst Steel right now. Definitely anyone, if you just really don't know what to play, this is the spot I was in as well. I just didn't really know what to play. I didn't want to go into the Sapphire mirrors and matchups. So I just went on JDR's dream board and found his Amethyst Steel and then started playing that. And I feel like that's a fine place to be, and you should expect decent results from that, bearing variables and how much practice you get to play with the list. But seems the strongest choice. Green blue as well. Just I think the Philip combo is stupid and nuts. It doesn't always work, but when it does work, when you have a good run, it seems to just, there is no way to beat it really. Like I say, the way I've ever been, we've practiced quite a few games. I get to do a lot of practice games because I play a lot of Lorcana and card games in general. But the Amethyst Steel versus the green blue, it just feels generally like you're going to do your thing, you're going to curve out and play your game plan. Do they find the Prince Philip combo and do they utilize it? If they don't, you probably lose the game. You sometimes try and claw it back a bit. Maybe you got to about 17 law and they board wipe you and you still have cards to play, but majority of the time, yeah, they find it and they just win the game. And especially if they find it, use it, and they also have like Clarabelle or something on the board and they just utilize that and get so much pressure pushed towards you. So just all around, yeah, I think that's the reason why it's never going to not be in the top tiers. It seemed to finish into a lot of the top cuts. If we look at the Barcelona games, not football. If we look at the Barcelona results, the top 16, it didn't actually have any in it, but it did convert into the top 32. It's still around a lot. It did quite well into other events, smaller ones like winner cases and winner boxes and stuff. But I feel like the data is still worth saying that just the combo itself is so good. It's just worth mentioning. I think it's one of the stronger choices as well if you're looking for a more control-based build. But definitely right now, Chroma Dogs or Under the Sea Dogs or just dogs and whatever flavor of dogs you want, very strong. I think it's just beaten by the consistency of Amethyst Steel and the option to just put in cards that could counter it and just crack it if you really wanted to. And I don't, as well, people who might be Benja haters, I don't think Benja's really the worst thing, because you put it in there and what are you saying is like, all right, I'll probably take out either a Cheshire Cat or a White Rose or something like that, and I'm going to add in an Item Breaker 2 quester free drop. It's like, well, that's not too bad, is it? Even into Sapphire, that's a usable card. It does get hit by Under the Sea, but a lot of people going for the Philip combo these days instead. So I just feel like if you just don't want to have the headache, I did see this a lot of store champs and I didn't really understand it until Chromodox has now become like a really important thing, I think, in this set. But a lot said they just didn't want to do the headache of the Chromacon matchup, and I was like, why? Just play it. It's not always going to win. They might not even find it, and then you're going to have a hold of Benja in your hand. But I kind of realize now that if it's this relevant, it's winning. It's consistent enough to win a CCQ. That CCQ is fairly popular as well. Hundreds of people. You can just put Benjas in and just say they don't want to deal with the headache, which is really valid now. Which at the time I thought this was a silly thing to say, but no, completely valid. Just put like 2 Avengers in maybe, and say there's still just 2 questers for the Sapphire matchup, so it's not useless. Or you just ink it. Use the inkable as well. It's not a useless card. I just want to, before I round off the video, I think these are the 3 most obvious and strongest choices. I do have a list for the Amethyst Steel on my Dreamborn that I posted in another video, sort of what it's looking at now. But I think really, if you're looking for a Chroma Dogs list, this is the template for it. And then of course we've got Pandemonium Heart as like the guy to go to for anything to do with green blue, so just check him out. But I think the A tier bit is the thing that makes this meta actually really, really interesting. So I'm just going to blabber on about this for a little bit, because that's what I do in my videos. I just rant and rave about stuff that I find interesting in a card game. But I find this A tier is generally actually quite interesting. The Sapphire Steel, I think, knocked down a little bit, because I think, with aggro still existing, with the Chroma Dog decks, and Amethyst Steel just being a bit more consistent than Sapphire Steel is, and it kind of having to put cards like Headless Horseman in to beat it, for the Sapphire Steel to have a good game into green blue, I just feel like it maybe is just like it is going to win some events, but only on the correct days where things go right for it. It's also still like the way Sapphire Steel's always been, it's a variables mess. Most people, if I checked Twitter over the weekend, like the people who lost Sapphire Steel, their run will be like 6-2 or 6-1, or like lost in whatever top 32, and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's because the deck bricked and it didn't do its thing. It's like, yeah, that was always how Sapphire Steel worked. It got you just close enough that you've achieved something, but then it was like, yeah, and then the deck just decided not to work at the one time I needed to work. I think maybe though in the CCQs it will go further, because in the DLCs that are going to be coming up, we're asking for it to do a lot more. We're asking for 12 rounds into the top cut. But the CCQs, it's like some of them I've seen like only a couple hundred, and some of them like 900, like the French one was, but some of them are only like 200 to 300 people. And to ask for it to do a good run there is not bad. You could maybe lose a couple of games in Swiss, or maybe 1 game in Swiss, and just ride out the top cut. It still is favored into Amethyst Steel, as much as I say Amethyst Steel is more consistent. I still think it's favored, so it has a decent matchup there. Probably kind of rough into Chroma Dog, so I'd always imagine, because it should just triple Daisy to start with and then finish you off with Go and Vincenzo. But yeah, I kind of feel it just falls down a little bit to that A tier right now, and I still think it definitely is going to win. It's definitely stupidly broken. Any deck that gets to utilize ramp 2 into Cindy is just beyond power levels, but Yeah, I think like the results this weekend were not as promising as I expect them to be. But besides that one, I think the rest here are all very interesting. I think they are all very strong, like rogue polarizing decks that can just be utilized and can win an event. We saw green, purple, and amber steel in the top cut, so they're definitely like ones to look at, and they're definitely ones to practice against. And I think if anyone's played on the sim that we don't really talk much about, Ruby Amethyst, like I picked up dogs because I was like, I want to learn what the mulligan is and learn how it plays. If you ever queued into a Ruby Amethyst with dogs, it was appalling. Like they play like Headless Horseman on your 7-cost tramp, and it just feels like the most massive tempo swing you've ever seen in your life. So I feel like that's where the interesting parts come in for this. I've said that word a few times, but if you're expecting a big uptake in dogs, you know, you can throw your benches in your Amethyst Steel list, and you know, if you find them at the right time and then the right matchup, they're good, they're useful. But you could just play a list like Ruby Amethyst that just seems really strong into dogs, and you could go like, I'm expecting there to be a good 20% turnout here. And the only really matchup I think that the Ruby Amethyst struggles heavily into is the green blue. When I was been playing on these different decks as well, and it just feels like green blue is a horrid matchup for it. But you know, you win the dogs matchup and you have an alright game into purple steel. If you could just dodge the green blue, you might have a good run, and that's where this has become really interesting. I think the same thing can be said about amber steel. It has a very good matchup into the sapphire decks. You know, you can just say like, I'm expecting a lot of sapphire decks to be at this event because it just won last week at Timmy's winner box or something like that. So you could bring the amber steel down, but then you'd be like, yeah, but when there's a lot of dogs and purple steel there, I tend to lose those matchup because dogs can use this under the sea on my entire board and wipe it, and purple steel just objectively has better statted bodies. But you know, you could bring it for that, and it's just like, that's interesting. The green purple as well, I have to ask people why green purple is good. I think people call it the Brainiac, which I don't know why we're calling it Brainiac, but we are. I've been told it's very good into sapphire decks, but it's bad into anything that has a daisy in it. So of course, dogs and amber steel, like, you know, you could again go like, oh, there's loads of sapphire there. Green purple as well is not the worst into purple steel. It's not the best either, but it's not the worst. So you could be like, you know, I'm picking my matchups here. I'm planning it out for a better run. And the same can be said for Blurple. You know, if the room was dominated by the Blurple, was probably the most fringiest of them though. You'd have to have like basically a 60% turnout of purple steel, which I don't think is impossible. We're looking at like 30 to 40% turnouts of purple steel. It seems like it's like the deck to play. So you could bring Blurple and be like, well, I'm going to farm all these matchups and hopefully I've worked my way through. I don't think Blurple has the worst game into blue steel. I think it actually beats blue steel as well. So maybe you're like, I think the room is like 40% purple steel and 20% blue steel. So, you know, as long as I miss that 40% that's not one of those two, if I've done my maths right there, 40 plus 20, the other, like, you could just go like, oh, I could probably win with Blurple, you know. And I think that that's what's made it quite interesting. You have this top tier meta thing where, like, matchup spread wise, those three decks are set at the top are just all pretty good. They have their consistency and variance issues, but that's what kind of means that's why I think there's three options between them. But I think you could pick any of them, and you know, on the right day, right variables, like I say, you're gonna end up winning. But then there's like another tier below that of A tier choices where it's like, oh yeah, but all more variables that I can predict as well. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of dogs in Cardiff, Wakefield, so maybe Ruby Amethyst is quite good for that. Or like, because I said it's got such a it's like a 90% win rate. I swear it does. I'm into that matchup. Or, you know, the same thing with Amber Steel. It's like, I think there's going to be a lot of Sapphire Steel there because I know a lot of people bought Cinderellas and Goliaths on card market, so I'm going to bring the Amber Steel instead. And I just think it's really cool that you have that undertone rogue deck choices for the meta on top of the very strong consistent ones. For the game like Lorcana, where we're only going to have so many decks because of the color combo like thing, is because it's color combo and like we're going to get rotations very frequently, we're going to have X amount of decks, aren't we, based. I think having this tier and the way that it's all planned out is pretty cool and pretty nice, and I quite like it. So I think the meta is pretty good, but this is sort of how I'd look at it. I'd look at this, the three easiest choices to make right now is Amethyst Steel, a version of dogs, preferably Chromacon Under the Sea. Green blue is, again, just because you've utilized the Philip combo the best. That's an amazing choice. And then from there, yeah, you've got Sapphire Steel as well. And a bunch of these sort of just like rogue decks that have really good matchups and really bad matchups, depending on what you're expecting to see at the event. But I think it's really cool. And that's just me sort of rambling about what I'm thinking about and how I'm going to approach bringing a deck to Wakefield CCQ, which is next week for me.